Right. So welcome, Helen, to my podcast, One for the Road. I'm really grateful that you've decided to join me today. And today's podcast is slightly different. And I tell the listeners why. Is because more and more clients that come to me recently, the more I dig deeper into their story of their problem with alcohol, I realize there's underlying problems with their eating as well.
Mm.
And I find that actually this is more of a tricky subject because it's even more silent than the drinking, you know. And I was headed your way by an actual client of mine that said you were brilliant. You worked so brilliant in this field. And I thought it'd be really useful to get you on today to cover this subject of disordered eating, actually.
Mm.
And there are a lot of crossovers between the two. And I'm going to read these slowly so they sink in, so people can possibly relate. Feelings of shame, guilt, numbing out, feelings of desperation,
Mm.
embarrassment, self-loathing, stigma and shame, secrecy, not feeling enough, not meeting one's emotional needs. But the big difference is you can quit booze, but you can't stop eating, right?
Yeah.
And this is where I thought we could have a really, really good conversation together about this subject. So maybe we can start by asking you to introduce yourself so you can tell everyone a bit about yourself.
That would be a long story. Firstly, thanks, Dave. I'm super excited to chat about this. I feel like there's so many things we're going to discover in this conversation today. So I'm really looking forward to lending my voice to this a bit, because I think what you said is so important, is that it's so silent. There's a lot of people feeling like they're out of control around food, but they're too ashamed to admit it. And so we can really dive into that. I love that you said that straight up. So I guess the short story is I struggled with bulimia. So I was binge eating, losing control around food, and then purging by actually vomiting, but I was also exercising like a maniac. So basically, I just was in this horrific vicious cycle, and this lasted for 20 years, where I felt completely out of control. The minute I started eating, I just wanted to keep going. And then, of course, I'd be slammed in with this feeling of, oh my God, what have I done? And then I have to undo all the damage. And when I discovered vomiting, it was just too easy, because then I could get my drug of choice and get rid of it and then go at it again. And obviously I was just caught in this horrific cycle of shame. I didn't want to tell anybody. I mean, how disgusting is that? All the thoughts. But what I couldn't have known at the time was just, well, actually, no, let me back up. What I didn't know at the time is starting to do things like vomiting and losing control around food. Once that cycle starts, a bit like I'm sure with the drinking, it's really hard to stop. And nobody really gets that message, is that we kind of think, oh no, but just stop doing it. Well, just stop vomiting, Helen. Well, just stop overeating. Just stop when you're full. But if it was that easy, I promise I would have done it. I tried for 20 years. I was desperate. I was trying everything I could think of, except for what it turned out to be kind of the thing that I really needed to do. But this idea that it should just be easy, it's just not true. And I think if I can deliver like one message to somebody who's feeling that real sense of shame, that surely I should just be able to stop this. You're not broken. It's okay. This is really challenging. And it's as challenging, if not more challenging, than other addictions, because to your point, we have to create an entirely new relationship with food. So
Yeah,
yeah, I specialize in bulimia, but I see there's just this broad arena of people who don't necessarily struggle with vomiting, but they definitely were going to resonate with that feeling of losing control and then having to try and undo the damage, so to speak.
yeah. Can you go into that then? Because, like, you know what I said about you can quit booze, but you can't quit food. I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be similar to saying, right, you've got to stop drinking, but you have to have a couple of glasses of wine today in the process
Yeah.
because you know, it's so hard, isn't it? We have to eat. And if you've got a disordered relationship with food,
Yeah.
I would love to know the sort of science behind that, of leading up to that disordered eating, the purging. What were your emotions?
Oh gosh, there's a lot in that. So first of all, I think that analogy is perfect. I really got once my recovery began in earnest when I started. There's a few things that happened that was sort of the tipping point. The one is I stopped thinking of it just like disorder, and I started to think about it more like addiction. And that's when I really started to find some solutions. However, I've learned that while that analogy is a good one, it's also tricky because we can't be once an addict, always an addict with an eating disorder, because that would mean every time you eat, you're going to be in trouble. So
Mm,
there's this, it's almost like we need a new name for this type of thing. But disorder just feels like, it's a little bit out of whack, you know? But this was like full on addiction, the cravings, the withdrawal, that sense of like, oh, I've got to get my fix. And you can't think of anything else but, the need to purge or the need to binge eat. So where was I going with that? I think I've lost my train of thought.
the emotions
You're talking about the
around
emotion, yeah. So is the question around what was the emotion of being in the
leading up
disorder?
to it is so,
Great
you know,
question.
imagine a typical day of,
Yeah,
like, because what I find a bit like, my usual client that comes to me is a functioning, say, woman of a certain age that functions perfectly in their life. You would
yeah,
never think there was any issue at all. They are brilliant mums. They do the school run. They're great at business. Everything is running externally perfectly to everyone else.
yeah.
But
You've
a
basically
bit,
just described all my clients.
yeah,
Basically
but
just
with
described.
grey area drinkers as well, you know, this is why it's so secret, because they don't want people to know they got a problem, because they
Yeah.
look great from the outside and it's how they feel inside. So I think that where I was getting here was,
Mm,
you know, when you got this issue with your eating, how did you feel inside
okay,
um on a
gotcha.
typical day of binging, purging? What
Yeah.
led up to it? What do you think was going on for you?
I think what you've just said has you've hit on the core of the problem, and I imagine it's identical with drinking. It's that relentless feeling of not being enough, the relentless sort of quest for, if I could just get everything right, and if I could just do everything right and be a great daughter and a great girlfriend and a great business owner then everything would be fine. And all the while, of course, outwardly presenting as somebody, I was running a guest house, was very successful. I knew people thought I had a good body. I didn't seem to think that, I didn't necessarily agree at the time, but all things considered, outwardly, I knew I looked like somebody who had it together. But inwardly, I was just absolutely, you know what it is? I always felt like anything that I've achieved wasn't real because I've been hiding this horrific relationship with food. So or exercise. So when somebody says, wow, you've just got it together and you're so incredible. So I always thought, it's not true. If only you knew. If
Mm,
only you knew. And the problem is this is so hidden because plenty of people really did not know. And there might be people who listen to this podcast who still don't know that I had an eating disorder and will be like, whoa, Helen, I had no idea.
yeah,
So I think if there are women listening to this who are resonating, that they're outwardly projecting something that's really together, but inwardly just feel like an absolute mess and out of control. So in a way, I think to your point, the emotion of that, the shame and the guilt,
yeah,
actually, of course, creates the need for the numbing, the need for that escape, just for a
yeah.
moment of feeling relief or just escaping from the endless cycle of not being enough. That's
Right.
probably the key. I mean, the
Yeah,
bottom line, if we had to pick one thing, that would be it, the
yeah.
feeling of
I can relate to that.
undeserving.
Um, with grey area drinkers, it's
Mm,
exactly that. And then after that comes the shame and the guilt.
mm, yeah.
So I imagine when you binge, and not all binge eaters purge either, do they?
Yeah, and not all. purges binge. There's just a sort of, they've just eaten too much. It's just that little bit over the line, but it feels like, oh no, now I've blown it. Now I'm also disaster. And just the inability to sit with that real discomfort of the food in their tummy. Because the food, the one thing I think where eating disorder will be slightly different is the food or the potential for weight gain from eating is also part of the shame. And I mean, my whole eating disorder manifested very simply as being a little girl who wanted a boyfriend desperately and getting this idea from society and mum and the world that if I could just be thin enough and beautiful enough, then boys would like me. And I desperately wanted that relationship. And, you know, it was started for such a simple and really sweet kind of reason. But my logic was flawed. And my logic was, if I could just be in a good body, then I will be loved. And the good body meant being thin. So there's
Yeah.
that sort of connection between the not enoughness and the
Yeah.
potential solution. So I was giving myself a solution for something I really wanted, which was to feel deserving of love, to feel
Yeah.
worthy enough to be loved.
God,
But I had the equation wrong the whole
yeah, but
time.
it really goes to show the level of where emotion comes into it.
Yeah,
You know, it's not just the act, it's the emotional side of it. And what you
yeah,
said there is really goosebumpy for me, right? Because we were talking about women, right? But I know men, a lot of men, including myself, who
yeah.
has disordered eating. So, for instance, I could have a really busy day in the office here with clients, doing stuff for the podcast, doing a bit of filming in that. I'd have eaten a nice breakfast, which had been muesli, banana, grapes, strawberries, you know, yogurt, and really healthy.
Yeah.
Do a quite a heavy session with someone, and then think, do you know what, that went really well, and I need a reward, so I'll have two big slabs of peanut butter on toast with a coffee, and then, well, I'm not hungry. It's a
Yeah,
treat.
coffee. I was
It's a
about to
reward.
ask. That was my next question.
Yeah, but
So it's
I'm really
not
not
coming from
hungry.
hunger.
It's
Yeah.
coming from a feeling of I need a reward,
Yes.
right? And also, we can cover this later. The feeling of reward can tie into when we stop drinking. Have we really resolved what is underneath the emotions of drinking? Because if we haven't, then we go on to other things that can include
Yes.
things like gambling, sex addiction, online shopping, or food, right?
Yep.
And the trouble with that is with the food is quite often we talk about the sugar monster comes in, right?
Mm.
Where we got the sweet tooth and we go, oh my God, if I give up drinking, that means I'm going to lose weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quite often we don't. It takes ages for the body um, and the brain to recalibrate. And also, we're dealing with a sugar monster where people say, I can't stop eating
Mm.
wine gums and cake and biscuits and stuff. And I always say to them, well, don't worry about that side. Just concentrate on stopping drinking, right? But
Mm.
then that becomes a big issue in their life as well. Then the eating becomes out of control because you haven't dealt with the emotional side of what's really going on.
Yeah. There's a lot to that. So I think that for some people, the food, the cross addiction moving from booze into food will be exactly that. The food becomes, oh, this is actually quite a nice replacement. And it sort of gives me the same thing, a bit of relief, a bit of buzz, a moment of numbing, from that emotional need for reward, or at the end of the day, I'm exhausted and I just want to let go, or whatever it might be. You're spot on. So getting clear on what's triggering, it's not one of my favorite words, but it is true, that's triggering the need for the booze or the food or whatever the drug of choice is, so important. And if we don't really get to the root of that, then you're absolutely right. They'll just move to another problem. I mean, I had a client who started shoplifting and she was doing really well with the eating disorder. And I was like, whoa, back it up, hold on, what's going
Yeah,
on here?
yeah,
We had to figure out what was driving the need to hit that button, that lever. But I do want to be clear that with eating disorders, if people have come into it before booze, so let's say they didn't have a problem with booze, but they started with
yeah,
the eating disorder, that so often it's for as simple as reason like me, it was just a practical solution. And then, oh boy, and this is where the real trouble starts. This very practical thing, eating too much, getting rid of it. You get a high from the getting rid of it. You get a high from the starving, the fasting. There's stuff to that as well, the release of a purge.
Mm.
All of those feelings, oh my gosh, look at this. They also meet my emotional needs. And just about everyone, because if you've got three behaviors, restricting, losing control around food, overeating, and purging, you've got three different feelings you can access that happen to work extremely well at numbing just about every single emotion. So we have this horrible game of whack-a-mole at the beginning where it feels like, I don't know if you've heard of HALT,
Yeah.
what's it? Hungry,
Hungry,
angry,
angry,
lonely,
lonely, tired.
tired.
Yeah.
If you chat to anybody in eating disorder recovery, they'll say, man, it would be anything. I could be happy, I could be sad, I could be tired, I could be awake. I was just using the behaviors to numb every single
Yeah.
emotion.
Yeah.
And so at first it feels a bit overwhelming, but it's cool. We just take it a step at a time, and you kind of work the easy ones first, and then you get good at managing those emotions. And then usually once the disordered eating and the physiological shifts, because with drinking as well, I imagine, what, 21 days out of dealing with the real withdrawal feeling from the dopamine spikes. And once that's stabilized, then we go, okay, well, actually, I can tell when I'm hungry, I'm stopping
Mm.
when I'm full, but every now and again, a big emotional charge might send me off the rails. And I noticed that big time. It was, oh, I'm actually really good. I've got a great relationship with food. But oh, when I fly home to South Africa, because I'm currently in Spain,
Yeah.
usually there's a few triggers out there, and it's usually coming from something deep in my childhood or in my teens where something similar happens, and it just brings up that emotion. And my brain just goes, oh, you know what we do with this emotion? We go to food. And so
Yeah.
I've got to be really slowing stuff down,
Yeah.
noticing that if it happens. The good news is, though, over time, it doesn't happen as much because you retrain your brain how to handle
Yeah.
those feelings.
I relate to that, and I'll tell you why. Because I quite often work surrounding associations, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
because in the beginning, what you say about the 21 days with the withdrawal symptoms or whatever, well, there's a thing in our thing called the pink cloud. So it's the
Mm-hmm.
euphoria of actually the beginning. I can't believe I'm managing this. I can't believe I haven't drank
I
for
love that.
7 days, 14 days, right? So in essence, it's the honeymoon period, right?
Yeah.
Because you've made the decision to do it, you're actually doing it, and you're doing it well, and you're getting involved with conversations around it. Yeah, I haven't had drink for 3 days, I haven't had drink for 10 days and whatever. But then comes the bit after that, actually, um, you are doing it, is this it? And you start to think about other
Mm.
things like, how am I going to go on holiday and not drink? You start to look at the bigger picture, because the beginning is the smaller picture of day to day. And then you start to look ahead, and then you have this slump, right? Um, and
Yeah.
I'll give you a comparison to disordered eating for me, um, is that I could exercise really well. I could feel like I'm losing weight, and then I will plateau, and then I will go to a stage of like, nothing's changing, sod it. And then in
Yeah.
comes the self-sabotage.
You've nailed it.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I can imagine, are there similarities there?
Such an interesting question. So first, I love that pink cloud euphoria idea. The way I work with this is because, of course, when we're doing anything with intensity, we're learning. I think of recovery as skills and drills training. We're really teaching people how to eat when they're hungry, how to stop when they're full. A lot of people say, I can't even hear hunger and fullness anymore. Cool, okay. Let's start there. Let's learn. Let's put in some things you can do when that bingy energy hits. I'm sure you do similar stuff with drinking as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like when they start to get that rhythm, then there's a bit of a euphoric period. However, with eating disorder recovery, in most cases, specifically with bulimia, I don't want to speak to anorexia, that's not my lane, but with people who are losing control around food and then trying to deal with the consequences of that, um, what we do is we build this mental, we create such a powerful experience of enjoyment around not doing the behaviors. And I think I listened to a podcast with Andy that you did, I think, last week.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful listening to you, because you could almost hear this reinforcing conversation of how glorious it is to not do the behaviors.
Mm.
And we really start to wire that in. But I think it's easier a little bit because people genuinely don't want to lose control around food. They genuinely can't stand the fact that they're hiding and trying to purge, creep away. And there's this feeling of, I actually can't wait to get rid of this. There's no part of me that wants this on the next holiday. So I think my work sounds like it's a bit easier from that perspective, because there's a little bit of FOMO, but we do a lot of mental work around. But we're not saying you can never eat a chocolate again. We're saying absolutely, if your tummy wants a chocolate, you're going to enjoy the chocolate. And so you can have whatever you want when you want it, in line with your hunger and fullness. And that it takes a while for people to really get that. But it's so enjoyable knowing that if I really, really want a piece of cake this evening and it's available to me, if that's what my tummy's really asking for, I'm going to give it a piece of cake.
Yeah. Do you know what?
And then people don't feel FOMO because they can have what they want.
Yeah. Do you know what? And that is where you've nailed that. It's the complete difference between what you do and what I do, because there's no way I can say to her, see how it goes. The associations I were talking about, the holidays, the birthdays, the day off, where you think, oh, I've got tomorrow off, so I can stay up and have another bottle of wine and then wreck the next day. It's like me saying to them, we can train you to manage those associations, to manage your cravings. So at some point, you will be able to have a glass of wine and enjoy. There's the difference, because of the way it manufactures in your brain, is that you have that one and you're straight back there for the majority of the time. The amount of people say, do you know what? I've had 3 months off and I think I can manage to moderate. And I'm okay. Well, let me tell you now, less than 5% of humans can actually do that ever. So good luck with that one. But what you're saying is that we train people to manage.
Yeah.
Because you have to eat, right? And that's the difference. You have to eat.
Yeah. And here's where I get excited, because the good news is that when we train, and, I'm open to there being an exception to this rule, but in my experience, when we really train people to listen to hunger, and we could probably do this now together, you and I, and when you actually check in with your tummy, that's what I call it, a tummy check-in. It sounds really sweet, because it is. We're checking in with our body. Like, what do you need? What do you want? Are you hungry? How much? And how much would you want to be comfortable to the next mealtime? Your body, when you do that, generally, and genuinely wants healthful food most of the time. If we've grown up in an environment where we've had access to healthful food, every now and again, your body says, I need that chocolate. But what I know, and somebody coming into my sort of coaching environment doesn't know, is that when they get that ability to key in, 99, maybe not 99, let's say 9 times out of 10, their body wants a healthful meal. And maybe it wants to have a bit of indulgence. That's not, but genuinely, and generally, it wants to eat a really yummy whatever. Now, some days that might be something rich and creamy, and other days it might be a healthful salad. And you get really good at listening to that, and you'll see it'll change with the weather and change with the hormones. But once you start seeing that rhythm, and you realize your body actually can be trusted, it might want occasionally those things. The relief people start to feel that they can actually trust their body's instincts. Because what you just described is so perfect. You had this really yummy breakfast. It sounded delicious, right? I'm sure you actively enjoyed it. You weren't forcing yourself through some vile supplement or something you didn't enjoy. But then you noticed, I'm not hungry, but I've done this really hard session or a couple of sessions with a client, and I'm wanting to eat for not hunger. Interesting. And so what we do, we're really gentle. People can choose to do that, but I want them to do it with that power of real intentional choice. There's nothing wrong with indulging. There's nothing wrong with giving ourselves a reward. But if it becomes this thing that we're losing control over and we're hitting that button every 5 minutes, that's where it's tricky. So we just slow it down. We get that distinction that you can tell that you're not hungry, but you're wanting to eat anyway. Now you've got some choices. And we just open up that space, and slowly you become empowered to say, no, I'm not going to have that thing. I don't actually need it. Versus, I can't help myself. I have to have it.
Oh, that's interesting, right? So what my brain works like the clappers when I do these things, right? So what I was thinking then, right, was cravings around alcohol, right? So we've got our favorite wine or a favorite beer, favorite gin or vodka, right? And that taps into our I really want that. So when we've given up drinking, that voice comes in, the cravings, and it's at a certain time as well, right?
Mm.
So if we drink at, say, 5 o'clock, around 4, 4:30, your brain's saying, "Oh, you can
Mm.
have a drink soon." So you get the dopamine hit, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about then my favorite thing, and I grew up with it, right? This is interesting. I've only just thought of this. My mum used to make me peanut butter sandwiches every single
Oh,
day, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
there it is.
every single day as a kid. No, I
Yeah.
would have nothing else, right? So that is a light bulb moment.
Mm.
Now, I absolutely love peanut butter, right? So
Mm.
I
Ditto. Love
I
it.
trick myself. Oh well, I buy the expensive one. It's got no palm oil, no extra added sugar and whatnot. Right. So that's where it begins for me. It's like going in the supermarket and not buying the wine, right? Because I know if I buy that peanut butter, right, I'm going to eat it all. I will be spooning it out the jar every now and again. I think, oh, I'm a little bit peckish. I just get a teaspoon, put a big wad on the spoon and eat it, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing for me is to not bite because I know I'm greedy. Right? I am greedy. I
Okay.
acknowledge that, right? But that's something for me to work on,
Yeah.
Helen. You
Yeah.
know, and I can use that to address many other areas in my life. You know, because I'm weak-willed around food, so I do have a bad relationship with food because I am weak-willed, I'm greedy, and also I'm constantly looking for some kind of reward, right? So it could be me looking in the mirror and thinking, "Oh, I've lost a bit of weight. I actually look all right. I can justify eating a bit more now because I'm greedy."
Oh
And
my
that's
goodness.
where, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? No, that's
Yeah,
what
I
goes
do.
on
I
in
mean,
my
I'm
head.
I'm just itching to get coaching now. Now my whole coaching game is coming.
Yeah, yeah,
I
but
want to
that's
dive
how
into all
my
of this, you
mindset
know?
works. So then what I do, I
Yeah.
start to think about, well, actually, you've stopped drinking, which is one of the best things ever in the world for me, right?
Yeah.
I've managed to go from that to there, and I don't even think about it. So if I can do that, I can address my relationship with food. But when I do
Mm.
that, it's then, what does that leave me with? Where's my reward there, right? Oh, I'm climbing a mountain. I'm exercising. I've got this, that, and that, but it doesn't have the same feeling for me,
Mm.
right? And that's the important thing I think to address here is, what feeling does that give me? Is it comfort? Is it the
Mm.
fact I'm doing it in secret? What is it that it is making me feel like that? And I think once you get to find that out is when you can address it. And this is why with my coaching, I delve right down to what's behind
Mm.
the addiction. And I imagine your work is similar to that, right?
Very. And just listening to you speak, and I think so many people are going to be resonating with this. Firstly, I also love peanut butter, and there's something to this peanut butter story because chocolate and peanut butter are the things I see a lot of people saying, "Oh, I just can't stop once I start." So we create a new relationship with that. But what was interesting is the way you phrased, "I'm greedy." I wrote it down. I'm weak-willed around food. Now, if we were working together, we'd drill into that a little bit because in my experience, unless you're an exception to the rule, you're unlikely to be greedy. You're a human being. You've got certain, needs for food and that, and there's something enjoyable about sort of letting go and having too much. And that's totally normal and human. So it'd be interesting to know where this greedy idea came from. But the I'm weak-willed around food is interesting because I feel so confident that if I was to teach you tummy check-ins and stopping when you're full, you would see it's not weak-willed. I bet you've got a ton of discipline in a million other places in your life. So I think to your point, there's something that the loss of control or the eating what you shouldn't is giving you. It feels almost a little, oh, it's good to be naughty for a change. I don't know if I've
Yeah,
got this right. Like I'm
yeah,
doing all
yeah,
these things that are healthful and I've stopped drinking. Where do you get to just be a little bit broken, a little bit
yeah,
imperfect, a little. And I see that a lot with these women because they've got unbelievable lives, to-do lists coming out. I mean, I'm the same still, I'm allowing myself to giggle a bit more at myself. But where do we just get to be frivolous and watch Love Island and not care what people think or
yeah,
whatever? And so sometimes you almost don't want to take the food away or the binging, or in your case, the peanut butter, because where would you get to just be a little bit
I
Not
really
perfect.
hear that. Yeah.
It's an idea. I mean, I'd want to dive in and see, but it's interesting as well that it came so clearly out of your childhood with mum. So there's a
Mm,
comfort there and a well done, maybe job well done, something like
mm.
that.
And another thing as well, it's like there's a saying I use that a car mechanic never services his car, right?
Car
So
mechanic there.
I'm
Yes.
I'm constantly trying to help people with the language they use around
Yeah.
themselves, right? The
Yes.
labeling, right? So I've just labeled myself weak-willed around food.
Mm.
I'm greedy. And I
Yeah.
just think that's who I am. That defines me and food,
Yeah.
right?
So we would want to
But
rework that to be a little bit more
yeah,
empowering.
yeah. But what
Yeah.
you said, there's something around food that is a little bit naughty, is yeah,
Yeah.
because I can go out and think, do you know what? I've had a little bit too much peanut butter, and I'll find a really nice oldie worldly tea shop that do baked in fruit scones, cream teas, you know, where you get
Mm-hmm.
the jam and the clotted cream. And I think, oh God, I had a couple of bits of peanut butter on toast this morning. That'd be all right. It'd be all right. You deserve the
Yeah.
treat. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
There's a little boy that just came out. Your face literally, I could almost imagine you when you were
Yeah,
younger.
yeah. Well, that's interesting actually, because I always talk about my childhood um, and my experiences around alcohol, and I've never ever dived into it with my experiences around food. And my
Yeah.
mum and dad, they always supplied a healthy meal, right? It was always a
Mm.
healthy meal. But I grew up with that mindset, and I must admit, I've used it myself. You've got to clear your plate. If you don't eat all your
Yeah.
dinner, you're not getting pudding. And I'm guilty of that because that's what I was taught growing up, right? But now I'm looking at it differently. Is like you've got to trust yourself that if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was tapped into me.
Yeah.
I've never looked at my relationship with food growing up, which has probably defined how I speak to myself
Yes,
now.
absolutely.
You're greedy, you've got a bad relationship with food. Go, it's really fascinating.
Yeah. And I love that you've noticed that it came out of your childhood because I'm also a member of the Clean Plate Club, which means that,
Mm.
I mean, I can't blame our parents, right? They, for money reasons or whatever, it makes sense. You know, the kids need to eat, but
Waste, so you can't waste food.
yeah,
There's
yeah, you
little
can't.
money. So
Yeah. And then there's this reward for doing this hard thing at the end of the, if you can get through the meal, then you get the ice cream or whatever. That was our thing
mm,
at home. So we've built these unbelievable associations with what food means. But what I'm really hearing as I listen to you is, and I am still a little bit there in terms of the when am I good and when am I bad? You know, what makes me good today? What makes me bad today?
mm,
And I think what's so sad is we've become as a society so we're drawing these lines around food where if you have any sugar at all, you know, that's a sign of weakness. Oh, it's a bit over the top, right? But you know what I mean? So we actually, maybe we just needed a bit of peanut butter or whatever, but our brains gone to, oh no, now I've done this bad thing. And then you, which is interesting, you jumped into that classic, you know, pushing the bucket button. Oh, well, then I'll go and have the clotted cream. But actually, if it wasn't, if you thought of it as like, I've just had a bit of peanut butter, maybe I had a bit more than I needed, not the end of the world. Then when
yeah,
you approach the scone with the, you know, the clotted cream and the jam and all the rest, you might have been not so compelled to just go, oh, well, I've already broken this run
yeah,
of good. And now I'm this bad person, so I may as well just keep going down this
yeah.
road.
I'll tell you where I relate to that is weekend drinkers, right?
Yeah.
And they
Oh,
go,
God,
right,
yes.
I'm not going to drink in the week, right? So they
Yeah.
have a skinful at the weekend, and Sunday they think, do you know what? I'm gonna a little bit more because I'm going to be really good in the week. So it's
Oh,
all or
yeah.
nothing again,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Good or
Monday,
bad.
Tuesday they're fine because they think, oh, it's Monday. I feel a bit hanging anyway. Tuesday it's what I did yesterday, all right. Wednesday the old voice starts coming, the reward voice, right? Of like,
Mm,
oh, well, you've had a couple of days off. Maybe you could have just the one, right? So you break the seal then. Thursday, and you don't just have one in general, right?
mm,
Thursday comes, you think, oh, I messed it up last night, so I'll start again Monday. So you're
yeah.
actually only doing 2 days a week, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
interesting.
this I love because this speaks to, and I'm sure everybody's going to resonate, this thing that we do in society at the moment. It's like You're going to be good during the week. So again, it's good and bad, you know, good during the week. And then on the weekends, it's cheat meals. I mean, the fact that we even call it cheating, we're
I
cheating.
hate
It's
that.
like,
Yeah.
it's the languaging around this. And this is why changing the wording, really reframing, not in a fake it till you make it kind of way, although that can work, but it's really useful to start rewording the way we think about food in relation to our being valuable or worthy or good enough. Because if the minute I have a chocolate, I'm a bad person, that makes me feel like shit. Then I'm probably going to, excuse my language, then I'm probably going to do more of that. You know, I'm just going to eat more because now I feel bad about myself until maybe eventually I get to bed. And then I can wake up and suddenly see the wood for the trees a little bit in the morning. But what I'm
Yeah.
really exploring at the moment is this idea of like, how do we really embrace ourselves with the imperfection? Let's
Yeah.
allow for some reward days or days where we just lounge around in our pajamas and really allow for that just being part of us instead of it always having to be, I've got to do this and do that. And no, you know, never can I be a bad person. And let's
Yeah.
just find ways to let go and let our hair down and have fun and be a bit wild and free and be cool with that and make
Yeah.
mistakes, be messy, you know, and just be like,
That's
that's
yeah,
part of it.
yeah, and that that taps into me as well when I coach people to say, like you have to find something to fill the void, because the difference with the alcohol, as I said before, is that you have to take it out and that's the end of it, right?
Yes.
But I always say to people, reinvent your old hobbies, explore different things, align with different people. Where, like join cycling clubs in the morning or go and join a Pilates or yoga thing. You need to fill the void, right? Like you
Yeah.
need to change your life. And that's where you can find different things that add rewards to your life, right? That's the important thing there. But oh my God, I could talk to you for hours about
I know, me
this.
too. And I'll just highlight, I think there's a distinction as well, again, with maybe the drinking and the eating, because we have to create a whole new relationship with food that's enjoyable and carefree. And some
Yeah, yeah,
days we indulge and other days we don't. But the void thing's interesting because people definitely eat to fill that void, to fill the not enoughness, the feeling a bit lost, all of that stuff.
yeah,
But what's interesting is when I work with people, we try not to go to alternative coping mechanisms. We actually really trying to, a lot of people will laugh and say when they get through the sort of the worst of the eating disorder recovery and they're starting to feel, oh, this is easy and automatic, their life is almost identical to what it was, but
yeah,
now they just think about it differently.
yeah,
Even though they've got carte blanche to put in that void whatever they want, so often there will be new things coming in, new relationships, people try things, and also there's a lot of space and time and mental bandwidth to do new stuff. But so often it's actually just they end up doing very much the same thing. They're just so much happier with
Oh,
it
do you
all.
know what hits me there is like with drinking, you have to end the relationship with alcohol.
You've nailed
With
it. There we go.
Yeah,
So it's
with
like a new relationship
eating,
needs to come
you
in.
have to almost go to couples counseling and work with the
Nailed it. Yeah.
relationship.
I've often thought myself as a couples coach, a counselor between food and the body. You know, it's like,
Yeah,
let's rebuild this relationship. There's been a lot of hatred and loathing and lack of trust that we basically have to come bring it all down to this feeling of like, yeah, I get you. I see you. You see me. We're cool. You know, we trust each other over a period of time because it's a long
yeah,
journey. We
yeah.
start to go, oh no, we're actually good. And actually, we've got this really nice relationship with food now. Not perfect, not perfect, but
No.
geez, a far cry from where they were,
Yeah,
you
and what
know?
is perfect?
Exactly.
Like
We're never really there, are we? It's
no,
just the journey.
because I was talking about the women I work with that they're high functioning business people, but what about athletes? I mean,
Mm,
you get professional athletes and sportsmen that
yeah,
have an odd relationship with food, right?
yeah. And it's so normalized now. It's almost expected. I watched something on Instagram earlier where it was just like normalizing this real restrictive relationship with food. And it's no surprise that when I work in Spain, so I advertise on Facebook. It's the best way for me to get out there and get clients. And one of the targets I use, because I was there, is things like triathlon and running and CrossFit, you know, because I know there's just so much silent disorder happening in that space
Mm,
because this idea of a restrictive, almost punitive relationship with food in service of the goal of being an athlete is normalized. And I think it is extremely tricky working with somebody for whom they're, especially a professional athlete or model or a TV personality, for whom their
Yeah.
body is actually part of how they get paid. Now, athletes
Yeah.
are easier in a way because what they start to realize so often, and again, there will be exceptions to this rule, but when they tune in to their body's hunger and their body's fullness and doing exactly, they may not even eat that differently to when they were on this highly restrictive meal plan, but they will feel a lot better. They'll stop losing control around food, and ultimately they perform better too, because they're not denying their body the rest or the nutrients. When we deal with eating disorder recovery, we really got to rework often the exercise thing. What does my body actually want to do today? Versus I've
Yeah.
got to go to the gym. Not for everybody, but I see a big one is around rest as well. So we rebuild the relationship with rest and recovery and
Yeah.
food. And with athletes, as we start to redo those two things, in general, they will perform better. But boy,
Yeah.
it takes a leap of trust, and they're not going to well and lean into that, because the old voice, the old things they believe, classic Marissa Peer, we're changing their beliefs, will be screaming at them, you're going to get fat, you're going to slow down, and all the things that are going to be scary for them. So
Yeah.
it takes a huge willingness and desire. And you know what I would do is we just go super slowly. There's no rush. Let's just do it one meal.
Yeah.
Let's just do breakfast. Get breakfast right this week, and we can grow
Yeah.
from there.
I
But I
love
think if
that.
it's somebody in a body that is underweight, like a model or something like that, that's tricky because they could literally lose their job if they put on weight. So
Mm.
that's challenging. But then people have got decisions to make, because sometimes you
Yeah.
are actually faced with, am I choosing the disorder or am I choosing this other thing? And what
Yeah.
scares me is some people will actually choose the disorder willingly rather than gain weight. But at least they've made a choice. Not ideal,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's the world we live in.
Yeah, it's the world we live in. Like I've recently seen a couple of TV presenters that uh, put on a little bit of weight,
Mm,
and I saw that it was all over the press. This
mm,
terrible shaming of actually they look really healthy,
yeah,
um, but they've just put on a few pounds, but I
yeah.
think they look great. So it goes on to this whole calorie deficit thing.
Yeah, the
Like
new trend.
well, it's been around for a long time, I think, and this calorie deficit, and you see it now. Like the average person requires 2,000 calories a day or whatnot, and then you go straight into, oh my god, when I've got a scanner on my phone that tells you how many calories in something, right? And
Yeah.
I was out the other day and I scanned this fajita thing, and it was like 925 calories, right, for
Hmm.
one like like a wrap in M&S or something, right?
Yeah.
And my brain went to, oh my god, that's half of my daily intake in one
Yeah.
thing that lasts
Yeah.
me about 3 minutes, right? Now I'm a big bloke, so I imagine that I've got more um allowed calories, but it takes me down
Mm,
in a really unhealthy
mm.
path of me, right? And that leads into the amount of people that don't eat to allow for the calorie intake of
You've nailed it.
alcohol,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I know people like that. They just don't eat because they think, I don't know, I should know this, but I imagine a bottle of wine is 800 to 1,000 calories or even more,
I don't have a
right?
clue.
Whatever it is. And I
Yeah.
should know that, but I don't know it all. But
You
they
don't know it all,
allow.
Dave.
No, I certainly don't. But I know people do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's
Because
that's
the faulty idea is, I can hear it screaming underneath, is I should only eat 2,000 calories a day, maybe another 100 or two if I'm whatever, or maybe more if I'm an athlete. But what happens on the day when you want double? What happens on the day when you've trained like a mofo the day before? Or, and this is where women are going to get a huge sigh of relief here, our hormonal cycles take a month. I think for men, it's sort of 24 hours. So there's going to be periods of the month where you're really hungry and periods of the month you're not hungry at all. But a calorie allowance, oh, that word, is so dangerous, because what happens on the days where women want to eat double, and what happens on the days when they hardly need anything, they're not hungry at all. And the problem is, the minute we go over the 2000, or whatever the threshold is for, whoever's working the calorie idea, what happens? You feel bad. Oh, I'm guilty, I'm wrong, I went over my allowance.
Yeah.
And there's another thing that happens, and it'll be interesting to hear we'll dive into that whole, I'm not allowed 2000, more than 2000, so I'll drink instead, because at least then I can get this kind of preferred drug, because it works in so many different ways. But the faulty promise is, I'm only allowed XYZ number. Now so we've got this, it's like this rule in our mind, and yet it's not true. And if we could take it over a month, maybe some days you'd eat more and some days you'd eat less, and it would balance itself out. But the minute there's a rule in there, what do? We rebel against it. So the more you think you can't have something, what happens? The more you want it.
Yeah.
And so we've really got to open it up and go, if you really want another fajita, if your tummy really wants another fajita, you're going to have another one. Because chances are tomorrow, you're not going to be that hungry. But you can see the level of fear and letting go of that rule that feels so safe. But it's actually making things worse in the eating disorder recovery space. And so while for some people, they can do the whole calorie deficit thing, and there'll be another calorie deficit, the principle of energy in, energy out, has been around for ages, but now everybody's talking about calorie deficit. And I've seen the sudden wave of people that I've, over the last year, who all telling me they have protein shakes in the morning. Now, I'm sure that's something I would have done if that had been the trend 10 years ago, because I'm being convinced to think that that's what I'm supposed to eat, instead of actually listening, is my body craving protein this morning? Because if I've just done a heavy workout, it will. No doubt about it.
Especially
we
when
have
they
to
got peanut butter
break
in
so
them.
much. Peanut butter in them. Yeah, I've never had a protein shake. I don't even know. But I went through all the trends, raw vegan. I was trying everything, because I thought, if I could just get the food right, if I could get the calories right, and I could get if I could just be perfect the way I eat, then surely I wouldn't have this problem with food. But ironically, that drive for perfectionism, which is based on this incorrect mechanism, was causing more trouble than it was actually making more of the problem. So I wouldn't be surprised if, to your point, the people who are thinking, man, I've got this, I'm only allowed 1,500, 2,000 a day, so let me drink in that allowance, of course creates more of the drinking problem. Now they're not even getting the nutrients from the food they need.
I suppose
maybe if
I
they'd
could
eaten more, they
relate.
wouldn't drink as much. I don't know.
But it's similar to the allocated units per week, 14 units per week, guidelines, the government's guidelines that you drink no more than 14 units a week, right? Now, there's no benefit to alcohol at all, like literally none, right? But these are guidelines. But it's interesting what you say about sticking to rules or not, because the rules are there to be broken, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a bit of a scallywag when it comes to that. And maybe that's with the whole thing around the eating side is like, 2,000 calories a day. Well, I'm going to break that, right? Because I'm going to have my peanut butter on toast and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it kind
We're
of
only human.
We're human. And
that's what we want to do, is break the rules.
I have really good boundaries around honesty and stuff like that, but it's my cheeky imp of the mind that plays tricks with me. Go on, have a couple of, I'll have one bit of peanut. Nah, go on, have two. You're gonna really love it. Do you know what I mean? And this whole thing as well is, where are these rules made? Because if you're 20, right, you can eat, your restriction is 2,000 calories a day. Like, I'm 59 soon, right? And when I was 20, I could eat like a pig and never put on an ounce, right? Now I'm 59, I could eat a bit of lettuce and put on 2 pounds.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. It's about acceptance, right? Because I'm sure I've got body dysmorphia, right? Because everyone says, you look great, Dave. You look absolutely brilliant. And I'm looking at me thinking, I'm a fat git.
Oh, I can't believe I'm hearing that, Dave.
No, it's true. Honestly,
but I love your vulnerability around that, because probably other people thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I have body dysmorphia that I look
Yeah.
at. I did it this morning. Absolutely. I went to get in the shower and I checked in with myself because this weekend I've walked something like 36,000 steps, right? I've had a personal trainer. I've really eaten carefully
Mm.
recently, because I'm doing the Big Nakar Walk 21 miles. This podcast will be out after I've done it. 21
Mm-hmm.
miles in the Peak District and Morocco. Like I'm climbing a mountain in Morocco. So in my mind, it's like, right, there's a goal, there's a target. I can really get hold of this problem I've got with food. That's just a short-term goal because
Yeah.
I'm sure that when I come back, I will want the reward of, I've done all that now. I feel like
Nailed
I've
it.
lost a bit of weight and then I can reward myself. So
Yeah.
again, it's about getting beneath the problem and my own relationship with food on the
Yeah.
longer vision of actually it's how I talk to myself about my
Yeah.
relationship with food. I'm
Mm.
greedy. I've got a
Yeah.
terrible relationship with food. It's
Yeah. I'm
reframing that,
weak-willed. Yeah.
and also the whole thing about, well, what is my relationship? What was I taught as a child? With my,
Exactly.
you must clean the plate.
Yeah.
Sorry, mum, she's up there listening to
Yeah.
this. Bless her soul.
Oh.
But that was the era as well. I
Yeah.
grew up in the 70s, and that was the era that you must clean your plate and lick the gravy off the plate until you get
Mm.
your apple crumble, which I absolutely love as well, by the way. Hot and
Ditto.
cold
Love
apple
that.
crumble with ice
Yeah.
cream. But anyway, it's made me really, really think myself about how
Yeah.
I speak to myself surrounding food.
Huge. And I mean, we've picked up so many things just today. I'm a fat git every time you look in the mirror. I mean, it's
Mm,
just horrific. And I can relate because I was so viciously cruel, relentlessly about my body. And it's about training. I mean, you talk about this training, you're training the brain in a new way. And I can choose to continue to talk to myself like that in the mirror, but it doesn't make me very happy. So, this whole recovery or sobriety business, I'm sure it's all the same. It's like, what do you want from life? Great,
yeah.
let's work it back from there. If you want to calorie count your whole life, by all means, knock yourself out. I personally chose, I wanted to have a much more free relationship with food. And the fear came up was, well, that's not possible because I had this story that if I was to actually listen to my body, I would just gain weight astronomically and become the, Michelin woman. But actually, when you listen to your body's fullness, hunger and fullness, it's generally keeping you in a pretty good shape. Now,
Mm,
would I love to lose some weight? Always, because the society is saying weight loss is like the status symbol for women. The more weight you lose, if you lose weight, it shows that you've got discipline and you're not lazy and you're all these things. So there's this nagging voice because I'm in a society that's constantly saying you need to lose weight, you need to lose weight, you need to lose weight, and I'm aware of that. So my work is about just when I notice it, just reminding myself, I'm in a good body. I feel good today. I'm strong,
mm,
I'm fit, I'm healthy. I feel good. And my job that I've chosen is when I see myself in the mirror and I hear that what I call a headworm kick in of like, oh, you're fat, you're ugly, bleh, all of the things. Oh, you look terrible in bikini, you're getting so old. Bleh. I
mm,
just go take a deep breath and I'm just like, what do I want to think about this body? Man,
mm,
it's a great body. Yeah, it's a bit wobbly. I've got some things going on. I'm getting older, but I mean, I feel good today.
yeah.
And then,
Uh,
rock what you got. Go out there, do the nails, do the
yeah.
hair, do whatever you want. It's your thing. And it
I'll
would be
bite
such a
my nails,
shame for
but
you to feel that you're a fat
no,
git when you've got this body
I
that's
know.
training for a
And
hike.
and do you know what as well? It's like when I was drinking, I've said before, I was on 4 different medications. Uh, my visceral fat was out of control. Uh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
imagine my arteries were awful, my mental health, all of that, right? I could list it for the whole podcast of what was wrong with me then.
Mm,
And now, um, bar the odd night, I sleep really well. Um, my mental health is a different level. My
mm.
physical health's a different level, you know, and I'm
Yeah,
a lot more positive now. I see life differently. I've trained how I am with other people, you
yeah,
know. Um, yeah, I still have this thing. Now, where's that
yeah.
come from? I look in the mirror and so basically it's like
Exactly,
one
yeah.
person in the room coming in full of 1,000 people saying to me, um, you look great, Dave. And that one person says you're a fat git. That is
Yeah.
me. It's the mirror of me and my
Yeah.
vision of myself. And that's what I need to work on. It's like, actually, like, work on yourself there, and don't be that one person that you're listening to above 1,000 others saying you look great. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because I would never have guessed. I mean, this is the perfect example of the kind of clients we work with. Looking through your Instagram feed, having chatted to you, I would never have guessed you were somebody who had any moment of dislike about your appearance. So you seem to come across as somebody who is just very all embracing of who you are. You're so real, you're so raw. I couldn't have imagined this would be below the surface, which I think speaks to what we said at the beginning about it being there's so much silent struggle and
Yeah. Yeah.
self-loathing around food and body. So there's lots of work to be done. And I think it's important also to acknowledge some men and women are in bodies that are, I mean, you gave up alcohol, which is such a joy because there's no nutritional value. It's only benefits on the way out. And so you will be getting healthier. Your body will be changing. It might take time. I don't know how long it takes, but I imagine over the years, a lot of things have changed, including the visceral fat. So awesome. And similarly, people who've been overeating, losing control with sugar, and there's certain foods, obviously, that are problematic. You know, we don't want to demonize them, but we don't want to pretend there's nothing wrong with sugar, but we just let's tranquilo, let's just calm it down and create a new relationship with that. You can always choose the healthy option when you have a sweet craving. You don't have to have, I don't know, Reese's Pieces. You can have strawberries or whatever. It probably hit the spot just as well. Maybe not bad example, but maybe you get a beautiful, like rich, beautiful cacao-based chocolate, whatever. The craving's the same. You just got to reach it with the nice, healthful option. But what I wanted to just underline is some people will be listening to this who will actually be in bodies that are too heavy for their Goldilocks zone. So in that, they are carrying more weight, whether it be visceral fat from drinking or whatever the case may be, or sugar, then their body is healthful in. There's no doubt about that. Not everybody. Some people are going to be fat shaming themselves and their body's perfectly fine, but some people will actually have excess fat on board due to years of drinking or eating, losing control. And there is often, if people are patient enough and willing to start listening to their body again, their body will guide them back into that Goldilocks zone. The weight loss will start to come off. It just won't come as fast as everybody would like. Everyone wants the 8-week shred, But, let's just take it slowly. Let's allow your body to speak to you. Let's get those signals reconnected so we can allow your body to guide you back into its healthful place. Now, whether you are happy with it when it's there, because a lot of people might be in perfectly healthy bodies, but internally they're shaming themselves. It sounds like that's kind of where you are. Yeah, that's understandable because that's society and we're being taught that it's never enough. But we can choose what to do with it when it's there. But we want to make sure those markers are healthy and we guide our bodies back there in a very loving, kind, but firm, Discipline is about a kind commitment to the things that serve us without there being this like self-flagellation. I can't have the peanut butter because we've seen what happens with that. Then I want more of it, So we've got to be kind and firm and listen. It's listening to the body. When we ignore the craving for the peanut butter, chances are you'll hit the peanut butter jar even harder later when you're not actually listening to your body, because there will be days when that is what it wants.
I hear that. And I was thinking then about how self-critical I am, right? And I put a picture of me 4 or 5 years ago in Portugal, and I was 3 stone heavier. And then if I'd said, look, here's a vision of you in 4 years' time, happy with that, I would be, oh my God, I am so happy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
we just adjust our expectations.
And that's just visually, and say, and you will be 4 and a bit years sober, and life will be completely different for you,
I love that.
But the other thing is as well is that in the sober community there are so many ambassadors, and this person who came to me has struggled so much to find someone to help them, and they found you, and hence why we're speaking. But they found you because you are, as they describe, very similar to me. What you see is what you get. You're full of knowledge, but also you're a normal person, where they tried other people and they were like, you know, all these wacky people that are selling big programs, but actually not nailing the truth behind it. Do you think that's going to change in the future? Because she's really struggled to find someone to help her.
Yeah, that big deep sigh. The challenge is that disordered eating is kind of the new norm. So the way I work is I help people really start to relearn how to listen to their body. And there'll be plenty of well-respected people out there who will say, oh, you can't do that. And so it's challenging because even eating disorder recovery professionals, and I'm using air quotes there, often have a disordered relationship with food in the way we're talking about, in that they have this very restrictive mindset and they might feel good or bad. And so often you see people struggling with disordered eating, and the prescription is, great, let's give you a meal plan, let's get your nutrition dialed in. I'm like, but that's going to make the problem worse often. So will there be more ambassadors? I think so. I think for every very restrictive tightening of any kind of rules, and there's this natural backlash, and I feel like I'm part of it. Do I see a lot of people talking about this? Yes, more than there were certainly 10 years ago, and I could have, done with this information. Thank goodness. And it will be a very challenging uphill battle, because I think we're getting sober is so cool, because you're a part of this wave, is it's becoming cool to be sober. You almost feel a little bit judged if you're still drinking, like, what are you doing still doing that? We all know it's, bad for you. And so thank goodness that's changing. I think this embracing of listening to our body and loving our body foots toots as is going to take a while. Now, there are people out there who are promoting it, which is wonderful, but I think it's one thing seeing somebody talk about it, and it's another thing really beginning to want that for yourself and then doing the work required to have it. And I think the reason it's so challenging is because the story that we can't trust our bodies and we need to be in caloric deficit and thin is the best thing ever is so prominent that I feel like this little whisper, and it takes somebody really having to be desperate to stop, in a way where they've tried all the diets and all the everything, and they're now so over the constant restriction and shame and all the guilt and all the things, that they're actually willing to say, you know what, even if I have to gain a few pounds on this journey, I will do it. I just don't want to be obsessed with food anymore. Please, I will do anything. And then they're willing to take that leap. But hopefully after this conversation, some people will be thinking, well, maybe that leap's not so bad. She had a point. And if your intuition is saying, if you're listening to this and your intuition is saying, oh, I've always thought that maybe if I just listened to my body, I'd be okay. I probably wouldn't gain that much weight.
Yeah.
Your instinct knows. That was the other tipping point, that really turned me. It was one, starting to reframe it as addiction. So I felt a lot less shame about the losing control, about the not being able to stop. But the second one was, it was this little whisper that said, what if you just ate when you're hungry and, just ate what your body wanted? Yeah. And I just had this intuition that was like, I bet if I actually just gave myself what I wanted, I probably wouldn't put on weight. And that's exactly what happened. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process. And that's okay. You don't have to rush this process. You can take your time with recovery. Unlike, I think, with alcohol, where I'm sure you'd advise to just, don't try and wean yourself up alcohol. I can't imagine that really works. It's probably better to just make a decision.
When there's dependency on alcohol, because it's dangerous to just stop. But for the majority of all of my clients are grey area drinkers, so it's slightly different there.
Yes, of course, that makes sense. Absolutely.
But right, let's round it off. Right, so a lot of my clients have a bad relationship with alcohol and food. So what would you recommend they tackled first, the relationship with the booze or the relationship with the food?
Oh, it's a slam dunk. First of all, I love that you've said first, as opposed to should they do them both together, because I don't know if this is your experience as well. It's just better to do one thing at a time. It's quite a lot to take on to try and smash everything. I want to do smoking and booze and food, like, woo, let's get some progress in one area. And the obvious one is from my experience as well, it's booze first, because your relationship, it's so much easier to slow all this down, to do all this focused work when you're not dealing with the booze that makes it harder to tell if you're hungry or full, and then you make bad decisions when you've had too much. So
Yeah.
obviously somebody's going to get way more wins on the disordered eating recovery front when they're not dealing with this. Yeah, what is it? It's like your brain goes offline a little bit with booze, isn't it? So it's hard to
Yeah.
make the decisions
Well,
and see
you're not
what you're
present with
doing.
booze,
Yeah.
and you know that whole hamster wheel where you will make different decisions in the morning,
Mm.
and they will start to change lunchtime, and then by the evening you're drinking, and then you think, ah, okay, I fancy a Chinese, or there's a pizza in the freezer or something, or I've got a big bar of chocolate that I'm gonna devour. So I think it's just too hard. So I think you
Yeah.
need to get rid of the booze, and also with food, because you have to do it every single day.
Yeah.
This is like such a huge picture. So I don't want to undervalue people that look at alcoholism
Mm-hmm.
as a full lifetime recovery thing,
Mm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I rather than look at recovery, as people know, I look at it discovery, because
Yeah, I
now
love
I've
that.
got over the physical cravings of alcohol. I've learned to live my life without alcohol.
Yeah.
I look forward, you know, I rarely have cravings, but I imagine that if it was my relationship with food, because I'm doing it every single day, I'd have to look at my relationship differently. And this
Mm.
is why I think removing the alcohol from your life is so important to do that first.
Mm.
It allows the bandwidth in your head to focus on your relationship with food.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if somebody was to come to me and say they have a really challenging relationship with booze and food, it's a no-brainer to say, let's get the booze, let's get you off the booze. And then it's just going to make your relationship with food changing so much easier. Just so much easier.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I just got the clear download. If I had a glass of wine at 5, woo, I'd just lose control around dinner because it's like I
Yeah.
didn't even remember to do what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, well, actually, if you want the recovery on the food piece, if you're going to have a drink, have it after dinner so that you're not trying to fight with the booze for attention or whatever. I'm not sure. It's just about, I just would forget. I'd forget to do my tummy check. And then the next thing I know, I was negotiating with myself that I may as well have one last time, won't hurt, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but the minute the booze wasn't there, I was able to give dinner that focused attention that it requires. Because it's the end of the day and we're exhausted. And I think, you know, a glass of wine or two, and you just forget everything you need to remember. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the sooner you can really take on the challenge of um, eliminating booze from the equation or whatever moderation of somebody, I mean, you'll have a better take on this. But I mean, first prize, get rid of the booze. That'll make everything easier.
Yeah.
But absolutely, work on that first. Get some
Yeah.
real wins under your belt,
Yeah.
and then we'll start dealing with the food piece. So yeah, it's a journey, and I think maybe that's a bit scary. People think, God, I'm never going to be out of this. But it can happen a lot faster than we think when we've got a willingness to go for it all in and really be playful, and just
Yeah.
dive in and see
Oh,
where we
Helen,
go.
it's been absolutely brilliant. And I think I've learned some nuggets about myself as well on this. And this is why I love doing this podcast, because
Yeah,
sometimes a coaching session for me, you know.
yeah. I know. I was
Thank you.
itching to get in there. I'm like, oh, the
Uh,
little coaching desire was kicking
I
in.
know, I
Thank you,
know.
Dave. And thank you
It's
for
been
being
a
so
real joy,
honest.
and I'm going to put all your details in the show notes. So if
Wonderful.
people
Thank you
want to
so
reach
much.
out to you, they know where to find you. Um,
Glorious.
this conversation go on for a lot longer, but I
Oh,
always try
yeah.
and keep it within a time bandwidth so people, you know, like to hear it on the way to work or on their walk and that. So, but you know, there's room for another one, another day. But thank you so much for joining me. You've been such a brilliant guest, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's an absolute pleasure. And thanks for everything you do in this space as well.
Thanks, Helen.